In the dusty towns of the Wild West, saloons weren't just places for whiskey and poker games. They were central to social life and, surprisingly, dining. From hearty stews to frontier snacks, let's take a look at some of the food that was served in these establishments which reflected the rugged, resourceful spirit of the time. 1. Buffalo stew.
Hi, Jason Champagne of Native Chef LLC. Today's recipe, very easy, a very tasty buffalo vegetable stew.
Buffalo meat was a staple of the frontier diet, and stews were a practical way to stretch limited resources while feeding a crowd. Buffalo stew, slow-cooked over an open flame, was hearty, nutritious, and flavorful. Cowboys and settlers alike relished this dish, as buffalo meat was lean but rich in flavor. The stew was made by combining chunks of buffalo meat with root vegetables like potatoes, carrots, and onions. The cook might add wild herbs like sage or thyme, gathered from the surrounding plains, to enhance the flavor. Water or broth served as the base, simmered with a pinch of salt and pepper for seasoning. If lucky, a dash of whiskey might even find its way into the pot for a touch of complexity. Saloons that served buffalo stew often used it as a way to bring in patrons, knowing that a warm, filling meal was just the thing after a long day on the trail. The smell of the bubbling stew wafting from the saloon doors could lure in even the weariest traveler. Buffalo stew wasn't just a meal, it was a story of survival and abundance. Packed with the nutrient-rich meat of the plains, it symbolized the frontier's dependence on nature. Frontier cooks often added herbs for a native flair, making it both a practical and surprisingly flavorful dish. Up next is another frontier favorite. Let's see how this iconic accompaniment became a saloon staple. 2. Sourdough bread.
Perfect, delicious sourdough bread. So let's get started.
Sourdough bread was the lifeblood of frontier cuisine. Practical and durable, it was a staple in Wild West saloons, often served alongside hearty stews or as a quick meal in itself. Unlike modern bread made with commercial yeast, sourdough relies on a natural fermentation process using wild yeast and bacteria. This made it perfect for pioneers and saloon kitchens where supplies were scarce. To make sourdough, a starter was cultivated by mixing flour and water, leaving it to ferment and develop its signature tangy flavor. The dough would then be kneaded, shaped, and baked in cast iron ovens or over open flames. Saloons often served thick slices of sourdough bread slathered with butter, honey, or even gravy from the day's stew. Sourdough's popularity stemmed from its versatility and long shelf life, making it easy to transport across rugged terrain. It wasn't uncommon for traveling pioneers to carry a jar of their starter, ensuring they could always bake fresh bread wherever they went. Beyond its practicality, sourdough bread became a source of pride for saloon bakers. The fermenting starter acted like a culinary fingerprint unique to each region, lending every loaf a special identity. Our next item is for those who needed something a bit more indulgent than bread. 3. Molasses biscuits.
Say hello to my molasses cookie recipe. This easy-to-make little cookie is going to be your new holiday favorite that you want to bake all year round.
Molasses biscuits were a sweet and filling treat found in many saloons. Made with basic ingredients like flour, baking soda, and rich dark molasses, these biscuits were a nod to the ingenuity of frontier cooks. Molasses was a common ingredient during the era. It was affordable, easy to store, and versatile in both savory and sweet dishes. The biscuit dough was mixed until smooth, often flavored with a pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg, and then baked until golden brown. The result was a soft, slightly sticky treat with a deep, caramelized sweetness that balanced perfectly with a cup of coffee or a stiff drink. Saloons served molasses biscuits as a dessert or snack, often offering them to patrons alongside other simple baked goods. Their unique flavor and long shelf life made them a favorite for travelers looking for comfort on the dusty trails. Molasses biscuits weren't just sweet, they were deeply symbolic of resourcefulness. The rich syrup provided a longer shelf life, crucial for the frontier lifestyle. Saloon patrons loved their balance of flavors. Sweet molasses contrasted with a hint of salt, making them as delightful with coffee in the morning as with stew at night. Next, let's explore the smoky allure of preserved meat to go with the baked goods. 4. Salted pork. Salted pork was a cornerstone of saloon fare in the Wild West, providing a salty, savory protein that was easy to store and prepare. In an era without refrigeration, salting and curing meat was essential to keep it from spoiling. Saloons often featured salted pork on their menus, either as a standalone dish or incorporated into stews, beans, or scrambled eggs. To prepare it, cuts of pork were rubbed with a mixture of salt, sugar, and sometimes spices like pepper or cloves, then left to cure for several days. This process drew out moisture moisture and preserved the meat, giving it a firm texture and concentrated flavor. Before cooking, the pork was usually soaked in water to remove excess salt and then fried, grilled, or added directly to dishes. In saloons, salted pork might be served with a slice of sourdough bread or a side of beans, making it a satisfying meal for weary travelers and cowboys alike. The intense flavor of the meat paired perfectly with the simpler elements of a frontier meal, ensuring it remained a popular choice. Salted pork embodied the Wild West ethos, enduring and versatile. It wasn't just fried or boiled. Innovative saloons sometimes roasted it with maple syrup or peppercorns to enhance the flavor. Paired with cornbread or potatoes, it transformed from a survival food into a surprisingly satisfying and much-loved meal. Let's see how our next item became synonymous with Wild West dining. 5. Baked beans.
In the 18th century, both for regular folks and part of the soldiers' rations. We're going to bake beans in the oven today, and we're going to bake beans buried in a pit.
Baked beans were a saloon classic, beloved for their hearty, smoky flavor and affordability. Beans were a frontier staple, easy to store, transport, and cook in large quantities. Saloons often prepared pots of baked beans, simmering them with molasses, onions, and cured meats like bacon or salted pork. The process began by soaking dried beans overnight to soften them. They were then cooked slowly with a mixture of molasses, mustard, and spices like cloves or pepper. The addition of bacon or pork added richness and a smoky flavor, while molasses gave the dish its signature sweetness. These beans were often served as a side dish to accompany meats or bread, but were also substantial enough to be eaten as a meal on their own. Patrons would scoop them straight from the pot, enjoying the warm, comforting dish with a slice of sourdough or a mug of beer. Baked beans were more than humble fare. They were a source of community. Slow cooked in communal pots, their aroma filled saloons, drawing patrons together. Cooks sometimes added regional twists, like chili peppers or even whiskey, giving the dish a bold character that complemented the smoky atmosphere of saloon kitchens. Let's move on to another saloon favorite, the perfect frontier breakfast. 6. Flapjacks.
My little buddies' flapjack biscuits are the easiest, simplest biscuit ever.
Flapjacks, or pancakes as we know them today, were a common breakfast dish served in saloons, particularly for early risers and weary travelers. Made from a simple batter of flour, water, milk, eggs, and a pinch of salt, flapjacks were cooked on a hot griddle until golden brown and crispy at the edges. The real magic came in the toppings. If syrup was available, it would be drizzled over the stack, but in the absence of syrup, molasses, honey, or even gravy were used. Flapjacks were filling, easy to make, and required only basic ingredients that saloons could source locally or store for long periods. For added flavor, some saloons would mix berries or nuts into the batter, creating a sweeter, heartier dish. They were often served alongside salted meats like bacon or sausages, completing a robust frontier breakfast. Flapjacks weren't just breakfast, they were a blank canvas for creativity. Patrons often topped them with everything from dried fruit to chunks of salted meat. They symbolized a rare indulgence in a rugged life, with their warm, fluffy texture offering a sense of comfort amid the often harsh realities of frontier life. Let's slice into our next item that many saloons offered in order to satisfy their guests. 7. Meat pies. Meat pies were a saloon favorite, offering a portable, savory meal that could satisfy a hungry traveler or cowboy. These pies were often filled with a mixture of ground or chopped meats, typically beef, pork, or venison, combined with root vegetables like potatoes, carrots, and onions. The pastry crust was made from a simple dough of flour, water, and lard, which could withstand long cooking times and maintain its structure. The filling was cooked with a rich gravy, often seasoned with salt, pepper, and dried herbs, then encased in the pastry and baked until golden brown. Saloons often kept these pies warm on the stove or in the oven, ready to be served to patrons as a hearty snack or full meal. The portability of meat pies made them especially popular among those who needed a quick bite before hitting the trail again. Meat pies, tucked in flaky crusts, were convenient yet indulgent. Saloons sometimes got creative, combining game meats with surprising ingredients like raisins or currants for a sweet, savory twist. These handheld treats were ideal for workers and travelers, providing a filling meal that was easy to carry and enjoy anywhere. Up next is a dessert that balanced simplicity with flavor. 8. Dried fruit cobbler.
Today we are trying to make a mixed dry fruit cobbler.
Dried fruit cobbler was one of the rare sweet treats in Wild West saloons, offering a touch of indulgence to patrons. Fresh fruit was often hard to come by, but dried fruits like apples, peaches, and berries were readily available and easy to store. These fruits were rehydrated and sweetened, then baked beneath a crust of biscuit dough or pie pastry. The fruit filling was prepared by simmering dried fruit with water, sugar, and a hint of cinnamon or nutmeg until it became soft and syrupy. Meanwhile, the dough was mixed, rolled out, and placed atop the fruit mixture in a cast iron skillet or baking pan. Once baked, the crust turned golden brown and flaky, encasing the sweet, bubbling fruit beneath. This dessert was a favorite among saloon patrons because it provided a comforting, homey flavor that was often missing on the frontier. Cobbler was typically served warm, sometimes with a dollop of fresh cream if it was available. Dried fruit cobbler symbolized the ingenuity of saloon kitchens. Without fresh produce, cooks hydrated dried apples, cherries, or apricots with spiced syrup, layering them under a biscuit-like topping. Its bubbling sweetness and chewy texture provided a nostalgic treat that reminded patrons of the simpler, homely pleasures of life far from home. Next, let's shift from dessert back to savory fare with a staple dish for cold nights. 9. Mutton stew. Mutton stew was a hearty and economical dish that made frequent appearances on saloon menus. Made from the meat of older sheep, mutton was tougher and more strongly flavored than lamb, but slow cooking transformed it into a tender, flavorful meal. To prepare this dish, chunks of mutton were seared for flavor, then simmered in a pot with water or broth. Root vegetables like turnips, carrots, and potatoes were added to the mix, along with a handful of barley to thicken the stew. Dried herbs such as rosemary, thyme, or bay leaves were used to season the dish, while salt and pepper added the finishing touches. Saloons served mutton stew in wooden bowls or tin cups, often accompanied by bread for dipping. It was a meal that could feed many with limited resources, making it a practical choice for saloon kitchens. Mutton stew was both practical and decadent. Made from mature sheep, the meat was marinated in vinegar or brine to soften its bold flavor. Saloon cooks often added barley or dumplings to stretch the dish further, turning it into a filling, satisfying meal that left patrons feeling well-fed and comforted. For those seeking a lighter yet equally savory option, the next item on our list was a saloon classic. 10. Pickled eggs.
In today's episode, we're going to make spicy pickled eggs.
Pickled eggs were a quintessential saloon snack, often found sitting in large glass jars on the counter. They were cheap, long-lasting, and paired well with a shot of whiskey or a pint of beer. The process was straightforward. Hard-boiled eggs were peeled and submerged in a brine made of vinegar, water, salt, sugar, and spices like garlic, dill, or mustard seeds. Some recipes included beet juice, which dyed the eggs a vibrant red. The eggs were left to soak for days, weeks, or even months, allowing the brine to infuse them with flavor. Saloons offered pickled eggs as a quick bite for patrons looking to stave off hunger while drinking or playing cards. Their tangy, salty taste made them addictive, and they were often eaten straight from the jar, sometimes with a sprinkle of pepper or a splash of hot sauce. Pickled eggs were a culinary marvel of preservation. Their tangy flavor, achieved by steeping in spiced vinegar, made them irresistible. Some saloons added onions or mustard seeds to the brine for a bolder taste. They weren't just snacks. They were cheap, portable, and perfect for patrons looking for a quick, energizing bite. From eggs to something more substantial, let's move on to another popular saloon dish. 11. Roasted game meat. In the Wild West, roasted game meat was a saloon specialty that showcased the bounty of the frontier. Deer, rabbit, quail, and even wild turkey were commonly hunted and prepared, offering patrons a taste of fresh, flavorful protein. Game meat was often roasted over an open flame or in a cast iron oven, seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and wild herbs like sage or rosemary. Preparation began with cleaning and dressing the meat, which was then rubbed with a mixture of fat or lard and spices to keep it moist during cooking. Larger cuts, such as venison or wild boar, were slow roasted on spits, while smaller animals like rabbits or quail were placed in roasting pans. The natural flavors of the meat were the star, complemented by a side of root vegetables or even a dollop of saloon-made gravy. Roasted game meat was not only a meal, but also a testament to the resourcefulness of saloon chefs and local hunters. The aroma of roasting meat wafting from a saloon often tempted passers-by to step in for a bite. Roasted game meat was a saloon specialty that highlighted the bounty of the wilderness. Whether venison, elk, or rabbit, the meat was seasoned with wild herbs and slow roasted over open flames. The smoky aroma filled the air, creating a hearty meal that satisfied both hunger and the spirit of adventure. Next up, we'll take a look at a dish that required no cooking, but plenty of patience. The ultimate frontier snack. 12. Jerky. Jerky was the quintessential travel food of the Wild West and a saloon staple for those on the move. Made from thin strips of dried meat, jerky was lightweight, portable, and long-lasting, a perfect fit for the rugged frontier lifestyle. Beef, buffalo, or game meat was sliced thinly and marinated in a mixture of salt, sugar, and spices such as cayenne, garlic powder, or black pepper. The strips were then hung over a low fire or in the sun to dry, preserving the meat and intensifying its flavor. The result was a chewy, protein-packed snack snack that could be eaten on its own or added to stews for extra flavor. In saloons, jerky was often displayed in barrels or hanging from hooks, ready for purchase by cowboys, miners, or travelers needing a quick, energy-boosting meal. Some saloons even offered flavored versions, incorporating honey, chili, or smoke from mesquite wood. Jerky wasn't just a snack, it was a survival staple. This chewy treat, often flavored with pepper or molasses, was portable and long-lasting, making it a favorite among cowboys and saloon patrons on the go. From the portable to the luxurious, let's move on to a dish that brought a touch of refinement to saloon dining. 13. Oyster Stew.
Then I'm going to make some awesome creamy oyster stew this Christmas Eve.
Oyster stew might seem out of place in the rugged Wild West, but it was surprisingly common in saloons near railways or coastal towns where oysters could be transported quickly in barrels of brine. This dish was a luxurious offering, showcasing the growing influence of trade and transportation on frontier cuisine. The stew was made by simmering fresh oysters in a broth of milk, butter, and onions. Salt, pepper, and a dash of cayenne were added for seasoning, while fresh parsley or thyme offered a touch of elegance. The stew was served piping hot, often accompanied by crackers or bread for dipping. Oyster stew was considered a delicacy, often served during special occasions or to wealthier patrons. Its creamy texture and briny flavor provided a stark contrast to the simpler, meat-heavy dishes usually found in saloons. Oyster stew brought a surprising touch of elegance to saloon menus. It reflected the influence of coastal trade routes, offering a refined option in an otherwise rugged dining experience. For something equally indulgent but more grounded in frontier practicality, let's turn to the fried delight of prairie chicken. 14. Fried prairie chicken. Fried prairie chicken was a favorite dish in saloons, especially in regions where the bird was abundant. Prairie chickens were wild game birds with a rich, flavorful meat that stood up well to frying. This dish combined frontier resourcefulness with a touch of southern culinary influence. The chicken was plucked, cleaned, and cut into pieces before being seasoned with salt, pepper, and flour. The pieces were then fried in hot lard or bacon grease in cast iron skillets until crispy and golden brown. Sometimes the chicken was marinated in buttermilk beforehand, which tenderized the meat and added a tangy flavor. Fried prairie chicken was often served with simple sides like mashed potatoes, gravy, or biscuits, creating a hearty, satisfying meal. The crackling sound of chicken frying in the kitchen was a familiar and comforting sound in saloons, drawing in hungry patrons. Fried prairie chicken showcased the ingenuity of frontier cooking. These wild birds, dredged in seasoned flour and fried to golden perfection, created a crispy exterior and juicy interior. Served with gravy or biscuits, it offered a taste of home-cooked comfort amid the often transient saloon lifestyle. From the savory crunch of fried chicken, we shift to the warm, spiced aroma of a saloon classic. 19. Pork and beans.
I'm showing you how to make homemade pork and beans. I have tasted a lot of different recipes of pork and beans, and you guys, this one is the very best one, I guarantee it.
Pork and beans were a quintessential saloon dish, combining affordability, heartiness, and ease of preparation. The dish, often cooked in large pots over an open flame, was a favorite among travelers and cowboys who needed a filling, energy-packed meal. The recipe typically included navy beans that were soaked overnight and then slow-cooked with salt pork or bacon. Onion, molasses, and brown sugar were added for sweetness, while mustard or vinegar lent a tangy edge. This dish often simmered for hours, allowing the flavors to meld into a rich, savory, sweet combination. Saloons served pork and beans in tin bowls, often alongside cornbread or biscuits. The smoky, tender pork and creamy beans made this meal a comforting favorite, especially after a long day on the trail. Pork and beans was a beloved comfort food that paired tender pork pieces with slow-cooked beans in a savory, slightly sweet sauce. This dish, rich in protein and flavor, was a saloon staple that represented simplicity and satisfaction, often served in generous portions to fuel patrons for the day ahead. From the warm, filling pork and beans, we move to a chilled and refreshing saloon favorite. 20. Pickled vegetables. Pickled vegetables were a common sight in Wild West saloons, offering a tangy, crunchy contrast to heavier dishes. Pickling was a practical way to preserve vegetables in the days before refrigeration, and the method added unique flavors that became a staple in saloon fare. Carrots, cucumbers, onions, and even green beans were placed in jars filled with a brine made from vinegar, water, salt, and spices like dill, garlic, or mustard seeds. After a few days or weeks, the vegetables absorbed the brine's flavors, creating a sharp, savory snack or side dish. Pickled vegetables were often served as bar snacks, eaten between sips of whiskey or beer, or as a garnish for heavier meals. Their long shelf life and portability made them a saloon staple, ensuring a crisp bite was always within reach. Pickled vegetables were a tangy, crunchy addition to saloon tables. These bright accompaniments not only added flavor, but also helped balance the heaviness of other dishes, showcasing the practicality and creativity of saloon cooks. Next, we'll explore a dish that brought a taste of Southern tradition to the saloon table. 21. Homon Grits. Homon Grits, a dish with Native American origins, found their way onto saloon menus as a hearty and versatile side. Made from dried corn that had been treated with an alkaline solution to remove the hull, hominy was ground into coarse bits to create grits. To prepare, saloon cooks boiled the grits in water or milk until creamy, then added butter, salt, and sometimes cheese for added flavor. Grits were often served alongside fried eggs, sausages, or even roasted meats, making them a popular breakfast or dinner option. Hominy grits were celebrated for their simplicity and ability to stretch a meal, providing sustenance for those with modest means. Their creamy texture and mild flavor made them a comforting addition to saloon dining. Hominy grits offered a taste of Southern comfort in the Wild West. This versatile dish provided a warm, hearty side that complemented both savory meats and sweeter breakfast options. Let's now turn to a salty snack perfect for pairing with a drink. 22. Salted peanuts. Salted peanuts were a popular bar snack in Wild West saloons, prized for their crunch and salty flavor. Easy to store and inexpensive, peanuts were a natural choice for saloons looking to provide affordable, satisfying nibbles to their patrons. Peanuts were often roasted in large batches and then tossed with salt while still warm, ensuring the seasoning adhered to the shells or kernels. Some saloons offered boiled peanuts, a softer and saltier variation that originated in the southern United States. These salty snacks not only satisfied hunger, but also encouraged patrons to drink more, a clever tactic for boosting beverage sale. Peanuts were served in small bowls or even scooped straight from barrels, making them an accessible treat for everyone. Salted peanuts were a simple yet addictive saloon snack. Often served in large barrels or bowls, they offered a satisfying crunch and salty kick. Peanuts were both economical and easy to store, making them a popular choice for hungry patrons looking for a quick bite to accompany their drinks. From salty snacks, let's dive into a dish that was both sweet and hearty. 23. Rice pudding.
Today, I'm going to teach you how to make rice pudding.
Rice pudding was a comforting dessert in saloons, offering a touch of sweetness to balance out the robust, savory fare. Made with simple ingredients, it was an economical way to satisfy the sweet tooth of frontier patrons. To prepare, rice was cooked slowly in milk until soft, then sweetened with sugar and spiced with cinnamon, nutmeg, or vanilla. Some versions included raisins or dried fruits, adding texture and flavor. The pudding was often baked until a golden crust formed on top, creating a delightful contrast to the creamy interior. Rice pudding was served warm or chilled, making it a versatile dessert that could be enjoyed year-round. Its mild, creamy flavor made it a nostalgic favorite among those craving the comforts of home. Rice pudding brought a touch of sweetness to saloon fare. This creamy dessert provided a comforting contrast to the hearty, savory dishes of the saloon menu. Next, let's explore a dish that paired perfectly with drinks. 24. Smoked sausages.
I don't know if you can hear that, but that was amazing.
Hey everybody, welcome to Chef Dad's Meat Market, and these are smoked sausages.
Smoked sausages were a saloon favorite, offering a smoky, savory bite that complemented whiskey and beer. These sausages were often made from pork or beef, mixed with spices such as paprika, garlic, and black pepper, then stuffed into casings. The sausages were smoked over wood fires, usually with hickory or mesquite, which infused them with deep, robust flavors. Once smoked, they were sliced and served cold as snacks or grilled and paired with bread for a more substantial meal. Smoked sausages were an ideal saloon food due to their long shelf life and intense flavor. They were easy to store and serve, making them a practical and popular choice. Smoked sausages were a flavorful, protein-packed option for saloon diners. Sliced and served alongside bread or pickles, they were a convenient and satisfying choice for those seeking a quick, hearty meal. Up next is a sweet treat with a rustic twist. 25. Apple pie.
And today I'm going to teach you how to make what is probably the most iconic pie of all time. It is a homemade apple apple pie.
Apple pie, often referred to as the pie that built America, was a comforting and familiar dessert served in many Wild West saloons. It symbolized home, warmth, and hospitality, making it a perfect treat to round out a hearty saloon meal. To make apple pie, cooks would slice fresh or dried apples and mix them with sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and a hint of lemon juice. The filling was encased in a flaky, buttery crust made from flour, lard, and water. The pie was then baked until golden brown, filling the saloon with its inviting aroma. Apple pie was often served warm, either plain or with a dollop of cream, or a drizzle of molasses for extra sweetness. Its portability also made it a favorite among travelers who could grab a slice for the road. Apple pie, with its flaky crust and spiced filling, was a nostalgic reminder of home for many saloon goers, as it brought a taste of tradition to the table. This iconic dessert provided a rare moment of indulgence in the rugged West. Let's move on to another saloon favorite that quickly became a creative outlet for frontier cooks. 26. Corn fritters.
These corn fritters are so light and fluffy, and 4 ingredients, guys, and less than 10 minutes. Okay, I love a recipe that takes almost 0 time.
Corn fritters were a cherished saloon treat, born from a blend of Native American and Southern cooking traditions. These golden bites were made by mixing cornmeal, fresh or canned corn, eggs, milk, and a pinch of sugar into a thick batter. Dropped into bubbling hot oil, the fritters fried to a crispy perfection, their centers remaining soft and slightly sweet. Saloon cooks often got creative with their fritters, adding diced onions, bell peppers, or even crumbled bacon to the mix for extra flavor. Paired with molasses or a dollop of butter, they became a versatile dish enjoyed as a side, snack, or even breakfast option. The popularity of corn fritters reflected the accessibility of corn as a staple crop, making them affordable yet indulgent. Patrons loved their versatility, pairing fritters with hearty stews or enjoying them with a warm cup of coffee. Their simplicity, portability, and satisfying taste made them a must-have in Wild West saloons, where the line between practicality and flavor often blurred. Let's move on to a quirky dish inspired by the French to frontier cooking. 27. Duck confit.
Well, hello there, friends. Duck confit. You've been asking for this recipe for a while, so I'm going to show you exactly how to do it.
Duck confit was an unexpected but cherished saloon dish brought to the West by French settlers. Traditionally, duck legs were salted and seasoned with garlic, thyme, and bay leaves, then slowly cooked in their own fat. This method not only preserved the meat, but also intensified its flavor, making it tender and rich. In saloons, duck confit was a rare treat due to the effort required to prepare it. It was often served with roasted potatoes or crusty bread to soak up the flavorful fat. The contrast of the crispy skin and the succulent meat created a luxurious dining experience that stood out in the otherwise rugged fare. Duck confit reflected the cultural diversity of the Wild West, where European culinary traditions met frontier practicality. It offered saloon-goers a taste of elegance in an otherwise rustic setting, proving that even in the wilderness, fine dining was possible. Next is a very famous dish that trickled down to the rugged saloons of the Wild West. 28. Shepherd's pie.
I'm gonna show you how to make shepherd's pie. This is one of those classic dishes that is just so comforting and special, and it's simpler than you think, and the flavors are just
Shepherd's pie, a dish of British origin, found its way into Wild West saloons, offering a comforting, layered meal. Made with ground lamb or beef, it was a practical way to use leftover meat and vegetables. The base was a savory mixture of meat, onions, and carrots, simmered with herbs and thickened with flour. This hearty filling was topped with a generous layer of creamy mashed potatoes, sometimes enriched with butter or cheese for added richness. Baked until golden brown and bubbling, the pie was served hot, providing a satisfying contrast of textures, creamy potatoes against tender, flavorful meat. Shepherd's pie became a favorite in saloons because it was easy to prepare in large quantities and offered a balanced meal in a single dish. It symbolized the blending of European culinary traditions with the resourcefulness of frontier cooking, making it a nostalgic and practical choice. And finally, we close out our list with a dish that showed that the rugged West itself could provide food. 29. Smoked trout.
My favorite thing to do with trout is to smoke them. And I'm going to show you a very simple method for making smoked trout using ingredients that can be found in pretty much anyone's pantry.
Smoked trout was a delicacy that showcased the bounty of the West's rivers and streams. The fish was gutted, cleaned, and brined in a mixture of salt, sugar, and sometimes herbs, which helped preserve it while adding flavor. It was then smoked over hardwood, infusing it with a rich, smoky taste. This process not only extended the trout's shelf life, but also created a versatile ingredient that could be eaten on its own, alone, flaked into salads, or served alongside bread and butter. Its tender, slightly oily texture and complex flavor made it a favorite among saloon goers looking for something different. Smoked trout reflected the importance of preserving and enhancing local resources in the Wild West. It was a testament to the ingenuity of saloon cooks, who turned simple local ingredients into a dish worthy of any frontier table. And that's all for this video. Which saloon foods from the list do you remember or recognize? Which ones do you think we should have talked about? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more nostalgic food journeys. Until next time.